Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a mix between a quick tip, a critique, and then all that good stuff and some beginner information. Now, this photo jumped out at me, no pun intended, during the weekend photo theme, and I know that I can show you some interesting things about it that will take your photography to the next level and help you freeze the motion if that's what you're trying to do, or pretty much what could take this picture to the next level in making it better. Now, it's a good photo to begin with. I like the black and white. There were two versions. There was a color, there was a black and white, and I felt the black and white was better because the background wasn't so distracting. Excuse me, text message. So what I saw in this photo is that this could have been really, really good if two things would have happened. One, if the kid who is jumping would have been frozen in his tracks, and two, if he was actually caught in midair. So let's figure out how this was taken first, and then tell you how you could do that by anticipating and not worrying about spraying and praying, by just feeling the moment and capturing it when he was about to jump and be in the air, and all of that. But it's a really solid black and white to begin with. So let's see, it's taken with a Nikon D3100. The settings, 1/125th of a second, which answers the question of why the kid's hands were blurring and why the girl looked nice and sharp just sitting there. 2, let's see, it's taken at 2.8, which is fine to help blow out the background using a 50 millimeter, which I would assume that it's a 50-1.4 or something like that. And ISO 200, no flash. What else means something to us here? Really not too much more. So I think it's just a 50-1.4 in the equivalent, or the equivalent of a 75 millimeter on this camera. So the key things that I'm looking at here, 1/25th of a second. The 2.8 is fine, but when we get to the 200 ISO, that is where the issue occurs. You don't need, this image doesn't need to be shot at 200 ISO because it's outside. A lot of people have gotten into the habit of keeping the ISO as low as possible if you're outside with bright daylight. But again, I'm not afraid to bump my ISO, but even if I had a Nikon D3100, I would probably be shooting outside anywhere between 400 ISO and 800 ISO, and I'm going to explain to you why right now. So we've got 1/25th of a second at 2.8. So we're going to keep the 2.8 the same. We know that to freeze action, you want to be around, well, 1/25th of a second is good, but if there's a lot of light, 400th of a second and above is really going to lock the motion down, especially outside. Or in any situation, well, it depends. There's a lot of different situations, but we'll just go from here. 200 ISO. What happens if we raise the ISO? We're going to get more shutter speed. So let's think about the exposure triangle here real quick. So we know that we need more shutter speed. What are the options that we could do to get more shutter speed? We could open the aperture up. So from 2.8, we could go to f2.5, 2.2, 2.0, 1.8, 1.4. That's going to let more light in, which is going to speed up the shutter speed, because that's going to basically let in more light. So the shutter should not be open so long. Then the other way we can get more shutter speed is by raising the ISO. So right now it's at 200. If we went to 400, we're letting more light in there. So your shutter speed, to compensate for that, will have to go higher. So in this case, I'd like to get to 1/400th of a second, or let's say 1/500th of a second. So we got 1/25th, 2/50th, and then 2/50th, you multiply, you double it, you've got 500th of a second. That's 2 stops. So we go from 200 to 400 to 800, and there we go. 800 ISO is going to allow us to have that 500th of a second exposure that we're going for, that is going to help us freeze the motion to make sure that this kid is solid. Now, I would say I would get the anticipation a little better, that I wouldn't have shot it right when he was about to jump. I would have shot it after he jumped, and anticipating that peak action where he was frozen at the very top of it. Now also, that's going to help you freeze motion even at slower shutter speeds, because if they're at the peak, the pinnacle of their jump, that means they're stopped for whatever split second it is. They're stopped at the very top right before they start using gravity and coming back down to earth. So I threw a bunch of numbers at you. I threw a bunch of things there, but the moral of the story here is just look at your ISO, and if you need more shutter speed, think about what you can do using the exposure triangle to get the action frozen if that's what you're going for. I think you may need to watch this a couple times, but I just wanted to throw those numbers out there and hopefully get it through there that you guys can see what we're going for. Nonetheless, cool photo, like what's going on in it, and that is it. So there's your quick tip, rapid fire critique-esque type thing, and a little bit of edumacation for using shutter speed and exposure triangle there. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.